Immigration to Sweden is the process by which people migrate to Sweden to reside in the country. Many, but not all, become Swedish citizens. The economic, social, and political aspects of immigration have caused controversy regarding ethnicity, economic benefits, jobs for non-immigrants, settlement patterns, impact on upward social mobility, crime, and voting behavior. As the Swedish state does not base any statistics on ethnicity, there are no exact numbers on the total number of people of immigrant background in Sweden. As of 2010, 1.33 million people or 14.3% of the inhabitants in Sweden were foreign-born. Of these, 859,000 were born outside the European Union and 477,000 were born in another EU member state. Sweden has been transformed from a nation of net immigration ending after World War I to a nation of net immigration from World War II onwards. In 2013, immigration reached its highest level since records began with 115,845 people migrating to Sweden while the total population grew by 88,971. In 2010, 32,000 people applied for asylum to Sweden, a 25% increase from 2009, however the number of people who received asylum did not increase because the large increase was much due to the allowing of Serbian nationals to travel without a visa to Sweden. In 2009, Sweden had the fourth largest number of asylum applications in the EU and the largest number per capita after Cyprus and Malta. Immigrants in Sweden are mostly concentrated in the urban areas of Svealand and Götaland, and the four largest foreign-born populations in Sweden come from Finland, Yugoslavia, Iraq and Iran. History. World War II. Immigration increased markedly with World War II. Historically, the most numerous of foreign-born nationalities are ethnic Germans from Germany and other Scandinavians from Denmark and Norway. In short order, 70,000 war children were evacuated from Finland, of which 15,000 remained in Sweden. Also, many of Denmark's nearly 7,000 Jews who were evacuated to Sweden decided to remain there. A sizable community from the Baltic states arrived during the Second World War, 1945 to 1967. During the 1950s and 1960s, the recruitment of immigrant labor was an important factor of immigration. The Nordic countries signed a trade agreement in 1952, establishing a common labor market and free movement across borders. This migration within the Nordic countries, especially from Finland to Scandinavia, was essential to create the tax base required for the expansion of the strong public sector now characteristic of Scandinavia. This continued until 1967, when the labor market became saturated, and Sweden introduced new immigration controls. On a smaller scale, Sweden took in political refugees from Hungary and the former Czechoslovakia after their countries were invaded by the Soviet Union in 1956 and 1968 respectively. Some tens of thousands of American draft dodgers from the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 1970s also found refuge in Sweden. Contemporary immigration. Since the early 1970s, immigration to Sweden has been mostly due to refugee migration and family reunification from countries in the Middle East and Latin America. In 2009, immigration reached its highest level since records began with 102,280 people migrating to Sweden while the total population grew by 84,335. In 2010, 32,000 people applied for asylum to Sweden, a 25% increase from 2009, one of the highest amount in Swedish since 1992 and the Balkan Wars. However, the number of people that were granted asylum stayed the same as previous years. In 2009, Sweden had the fourth largest number of asylum applications in the EU and the largest number per capita after Cyprus and Malta. During 2010, the most common reason for immigrating to Sweden was labor migrants, family reunification, immigrating under the EU/EES rules of free movement, students, refugees, demographics, current population of immigrants and their descendants. There are no exact numbers on the ethnic background of migrants and their descendants in Sweden as the Swedish state does not base any statistics on ethnicity. This is however not to be confused with the migrants' national backgrounds which are being recorded. As of 2011, A Statistics Sweden study showed that around 27% or 2,500,000 inhabitants of Sweden had full or partial foreign background and around 73% or 7 million had no foreign background. Of these inhabitants, 1,427,296 persons living in Sweden were born abroad. In addition, 430,253 persons were born in Sweden to two parents born abroad and another 666,723 persons had one parent born abroad. Immigration. In 1998, there were 1,746,921 inhabitants of foreign background and their descendants, foreign-born and children of international migrants, composing around 20% of the Swedish population. Around 1,216,659 or 70% came from Scandinavia and the rest of Europe and 530,262 or 30% came from the rest of the world. In 2011, with the total population being 9,562,556, roughly 15% of the population was born abroad, 5% of the population was born in Sweden to two parents born abroad, and another 7% was born in Sweden to one parent born abroad, resulting in 27% of the Swedish population being of at least partly foreign descent. Country of origin for persons born abroad, ethnicity, East and Southeast Asians in Sweden. 115,331 people in Sweden are born in East Asian and Southeast Asian people, which is about 1% of the entire population. The largest groups are Thai, Chinese and Vietnamese. East and Southeast Asians have moved to Sweden for very different reasons. Most Thai and Filipinos arrived in Sweden via family reunification, while Vietnamese and Burmese came as refugees. The group also consists of 10,000 South Koreans, in which the overwhelming majority came through international adoptions in the 70 euro unregistered trademark S and 80 euro unregistered trademark S. The Asian population is spread all over the country, with some groups overrepresented in Stockholm. South Asians in Sweden. Unlike its Scandinavian neighbor, Sweden doesn't have a large South Asian population. In 2013 there were 46,231 South Asian-born people living in Sweden, which represents about 0.5% of the entire population. Indian-born constitutes the largest group with approximately 20,000 persons. About half of them came to Sweden through international adoptions and have limited connection to their country of birth. During the last decade, the number of Indians who moved to Sweden because of employment increased, and the last few years Indians are among the fastest-growing immigrant groups. South Americans in Sweden. 66,912 persons in Sweden are born in South America. The largest groups are Chileans, Colombians and Peruvians. During Pinochet euro unregistered trademark S regime in Chile, Sweden granted asylum to several thousand refugees who left Chile during these years. Also Argentinians and Uruguayans whom fled their dictatorship were granted asylum, but to a lesser extent than Chileans. Since the democratization of South America, the immigration to Sweden changed from refugees to family reunification and more lately to migration for employment and education purposes. The fastest-growing group is currently Brazilians, followed by Colombians. The Syrians in Sweden. The Syrians in Sweden numbered around 120,000 people as of 2009, or 1.3% of the total population of Sweden. Their size doubled in the period of 2002 to 2009. Sweden has a particularly large Assyrian-Syriacs community that grew substantially during the Iraq War. The Swedish city of Zaar currency has alone taken in more Iraqi refugees than the United States and Canada combined. Zaar currency has the largest group of Assyrian-Syriacs of any city in Europe, with more than 30,000 Assyrian-Syriacs living in Zaar currency, and around 50,000 Assyrian-Syriacs living in Stockholm County. Zaar is often nicknamed Little Baghdad, or Mesopotamia currency owing to the number of Iraqi-based inhabitants in the city. Arabs in Sweden. There are around 230,000 people born in Arabic countries, which makes them the largest minority in Sweden if counted as one minority group. In reality, Arabs come from 18 different nations and represent several different religious groups. Arabs are spread all over Sweden with high concentrations in Malmö paragraph, Zar paragraph Delta currency Lje, Noraka paragraph Ping, Örebro, Stockholm and Gothenburg. The largest groups originates from Iraq, Syria and Lebanon. In Sweden, a large number of people born in Arabic countries are not ethnic Arabs, these are mainly Maronites and Assyrian Syriacs. Arabs are one of the fastest growing groups in Sweden because of Sweden unregistered trademark's liberal immigration laws and the ongoing conflicts in Iraq and Syria. Even though the majority of Arabs arrived in Sweden as asylum seekers and via family reunification, large groups also have arrived lately as labor migrants. Bosnians in Sweden. As of December 31, 2009, there are 56,127 people born in Bosnia and Herzegovina living in Sweden. This figure does not include Yugoslavs of Bosnian and Herzegovinian origin who immigrated before 1992. Most of these immigrants came to Sweden during the Bosnian War in the 1990s. Finns in Sweden. Sweden Finns are a Finnish-speaking minority in Sweden. The Finnish-speaking Swedes are not to be confused with the Swedish-speaking Finland Swedes in Finland. In year 2008 there were over 675,000 people in Sweden who were either born in Finland or have at least one parent or grandparent who was born in Finland. 3. Iranians in Sweden. There are over 90,000 Iranians in Sweden, with most of them going on to higher education. Somalis in Sweden. According to Statistics Sweden, there were 31,734 immigrants from Somalia in 2009. In 2012, the number had increased to 43,966. Most arrived as asylum seekers and through family reunification services in the 1990s and the 2000s. Since the mid-2000s, there has been an increasing secondary migration of Somali immigrants and EU citizens from Sweden and other Scandinavian countries toward the United Kingdom. This exodus has been attributed to a desire to reunite with family members, to find work and to obtain international education in an environment that is perceived as friendlier. Kurds in Sweden. There are around 60,000 Kurds living in Sweden. Most of them live in the capital Stockholm, Malmö paragraph or in Uppsala. A majority of Kurdish political refugees choose Sweden as their host country and therefore they have a cultural presence in Sweden. Romani in Sweden, not to be confused with the Romanian people. Romani in Sweden were formerly known as Zigener for Roma and Tatar for Romani travelers. More recently the Roma has been adopted as a collective designation referring to both groups, with Rysand also referring to the latter only. Currently, there are approximately 50,000 Romani living in Sweden, many of them being Finnish Kale who immigrated in the 1960s. The latter, particularly women, often wear traditional dress in public. Romani in Sweden have periodically suffered at the hands of the state. For example, the state has subjected children to being forcibly taken into foster care, or even forcibly sterilized Romani women. Prejudice against Romanis is widespread, with most stereotypes portraying Romani as welfare cheats, shoplifters, and con artists. In the 1992, Bert Karlsson, one of the leaders of Ny Demokrati, declared that gypsies are responsible for 90% of crime against senior citizens in Sweden. Previously he had tried to ban the entry of Romani to his Skara Sommarland theme park, because he considered them responsible for theft. Some shopkeepers, employers and landlords continue to discriminate Romani. The situation is, however, improving for the Roma. There are several Romani organizations that promote Romani rights and culture in Sweden. Since 2000, Romani Chib is an officially recognized minority language in Sweden. The Swedish government also has a special standing delegation for Romani issues. There is now even a Romani folk high school in Gothenburg. Turks in Sweden. There are around 20,000 ethnic Turks living in Sweden. Most of them came as labor immigrants in the 1960s and 1970s. Most of them live in Stockholm and Malmö paragraph. Serbs in Sweden. There are around 80,000 Serbs living in Sweden. The Swedish Serbs constituted a low percentage of the Swedish population prior to the 1960s. Some came after World War II, mostly seeking political asylum. The greatest proportion of Serbs came together with Greeks, Italians and Turks under the visa agreements in times of severe labor shortages or when particular skills were deficient within Sweden. During the 1960s and 1970s, agreements were signed with the governments of Yugoslavia to help Sweden overcome its severe labor shortage. Bosnian Serbs and Croatian Serbs migrated in another wave during and after the Yugoslav wars. Another wave of Kosovar Serbs came during the Kosovo War in 1999. Albanians in Sweden. There are more than 50,000 ethnic Albanians in Sweden. They come from all Albanian-dominated parts of the Balkans. Many Albanians come from Kosovo in early 1990s because of the wars in the Balkans. Religion. Christianity. Protestantism. Catholicism. Eastern Orthodoxy. Oriental Orthodoxy, Islam. Judaism. Hinduism. Buddhism. Effects of immigration, demographic. Immigration has a significant effect on the demographics of Sweden. Since World War II, Sweden has, like other developed nations, turned into a country with a low fertility rate. Due to the high birth rates in early post-war years and the steep decline in the late 20th century, Sweden has one of the oldest populations in the world. In 2009, 102,280 immigrants entered Sweden while the total population grew by 84,335. The high immigration rate, low fertility and high death rate is gradually transforming the previously homogeneous nation of Sweden into a multicultural country. The Sweden Democrats has criticized the country's current immigration policies, claiming they can pose a major demographic threat to Sweden in the future. It is expected that the Muslim minority in Sweden will grow from 5% to 10% by 2030. Economic. Social. Ethnic conflicts. Anti-Semitism. A government study in 2006 estimated that 5% of the total adult population and 39% of adult Muslims harbor systematic anti-Semitic views. In March 2010, Fredrik Sirudsk of the Jewish community of Malmö Paragraph told Die Press, an Austrian internet publication, that Jews are being harassed and physically attacked by people from the Middle East, although he added that only a small number of Malmö's 40,000 Muslims exhibit hatred of Jews. Sirudsk also stated that approximately 30 Jewish families have emigrated from Malmö to Israel in the past year, specifically to escape from harassment, estimating that the already small Jewish population is shrinking by 5% a year. OE Malmö is a place to move away from. Right now many Jews in Malmö Paragraph are really concerned about the situation and only unregistered trademark T believe they have a future here he said, citing anti-Semitism as the primary reason. The Swedish newspaper Ska Dagbladet reported that attacks on Jews in Malmö totaled 79 in 2009, about twice as many as the previous year, according to police statistics. Judith Popinski, an 86-year-old Holocaust survivor, told the Daily Telegraph that she is no longer invited to schools that have a large Muslim presence to tell her story of surviving the Holocaust. Popinski, who found refuge in Malmö in 1945, stated that, until recently, she told her story in Malmö's schools as part of their Holocaust studies program, but that now, many schools no longer ask Holocaust survivors to tell their stories, because Muslim students treat them with such disrespect, either ignoring the speakers or walking out of the class. She further stated that Malmö reminds me of the anti-Semitism I felt as a child in Poland before the war. I am not safe as a Jew in Sweden anymore. In December 2010, the Jewish human rights organization Simon Wiesenthal Center issued a travel advisory concerning Sweden, advising Jews to express extreme caution when visiting the southern parts of the country due to an increase in verbal and physical harassment of Jewish citizens in the city of Malmö Paragraph. Segregation. Crime. Immigrants are overrepresented in Sweden's crime statistics. In a study by the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention in 1997 – 2001, 25% of the almost 1,520,000 offences were found to be committed by people born abroad and almost 20% were committed by Swedish-born people of foreign background. In the study, immigrants were found to be 4 times more likely to be investigated for lethal violence and robbery than ethnic Swedes. In addition, immigrants were 3 times more likely to be investigated for violent assault, and 5 times more likely to be investigated for sex crimes. Those from North Africa and Western Asia were overrepresented. Language: immigrant languages in Sweden, Rinkeby Swedish, Swedish as a second language, environment, education. Political. Health. Politics. Legal issues. Media coverage. The conservative American TV channels Fox News and Christian Broadcasting Network have aired news reports portraying immigration to the Swedish city of Malmö. Paragraph. See also: Outline of Sweden, Swedish nationality law, refugee controversy in SJA. Paragraph Bo, ZA. Paragraph Data currency Lje, Malmö. Paragraph Lars Vilks Mohammed drawings controversy, aging of Europe, references Iran. History. World War II, immigration increased markedly with World War II. Historically, the most numerous of foreign-born nationalities are ethnic Germans from Germany and other Scandinavians from Denmark and Norway. In short order, 70,000 war children were evacuated from Finland, of which 15,000 remained in Sweden. Also, many of Denmark's nearly 7,000 Jews who were evacuated to Sweden decided to remain there. A sizable community from the Baltic states arrived during the Second World War, 1945 to 1916. People, or 14.3% of the inhabitants in Sweden, were foreign-born. Of these, 859,000 were born outside the European Union and 477,000 were born in another EU member state. Sweden has been transformed from a nation of net emigration ending after World War I to a nation of net immigration from World War II onwards. In 2013, immigration reached its highest level since records began, with 115,845 people migrating to Sweden while the total population grew by 88,971. In 2010, 32,000 people applied for asylum to Sweden, a 25% increase from 2009. However, the number of people who received asylum did not increase because the large increase was much due to the allowing of Serbian nationals to travel without a visa to Sweden. In 2009, Sweden had the 4th largest number of asylum applications in the EU and the largest number per capita after Cyprus and Malta. Immigrants in Sweden are mostly concentrated in the urban areas of Svealand and Gar. Paragraph to land, and the 4 largest foreign-born populations in Sweden come from Finland, Yugoslavia, Iraq, and immigration to Sweden is the process by which people migrate to Sweden to reside in the country. Many, but not all, become Swedish citizens. The economic, social, and political aspects of immigration have caused controversy regarding ethnicity, economic benefits, jobs for non-immigrants, settlement patterns, impact on upward social mobility, crime, and voting behavior. As the Swedish state does not base any statistics on ethnicity, there are no exact numbers on the total number of people of immigrant background in Sweden. As of 2010, 1.33 million. During the 1950s and 1960s, the recruitment of immigrant labor was an important factor of immigration. The Nordic countries signed a trade agreement in 1952, establishing a common labor market and free movement across borders. This migration within the Nordic countries, especially from Finland to Scandinavia, was essential to create the tax base required for the expansion of the strong public sector now characteristic of Scandinavia. This continued until 1967, when the labor market became saturated, and Sweden introduced new immigration